Howdy ho, folks. Howdy ho. Howdy ho, America and points beyond. Who has power and what are they doing with it? Politics is not a natural act.
That's right.
That's right.
I must admit, I've never heard that one from you, Tom.
There's so many feisty fighters against the greedheads and boneheads. So grab a libation, join the conversation. It's the personal side of politics, and it is surprisingly tasty. Hightower right here with you for another Hightower Happy Hour, Lowdown Happy Hour at the Chat and Chew Cafe, otherwise known as my kitchen. And around the old kitchen round table here, I want you to pull a libation of your own choice and pull up a chair. Join us here because we got a special, plenty to chat and chew about here tonight. It is our Thanksgiving show. Yes, notice the pumpkin colors. Got the winter hat on. Yeah, no, we're au contraire here, and we are thankful indeed for what? Let's talk about that. What are we thankful about? Here we are having a Thanksgiving dinner coming up all across America, all sorts of different cultures, celebrating in different ways. And it's appropriate to ask, what are we actually thankful for, food-wise? And what are we celebrating and how? Want to hear from you on that. What are you doing this Thanksgiving, you and your family and friends and acquainted ones, and who knows who might wander into your home? What is on your plate this Thanksgiving dinner? So we have our annual Hightower Lowdown State of the Plate issue that is just out, hot off the presses, and we're talking about those various issues, the difference between agricultural industry, and agriculture, the art and science of trying to cooperate with nature rather than just bombing it and trying to overwhelm it. So, is your plate filled with fetal bovine blood serum? Yes, that's a topic for tonight. Is it filled with monopsony? Related to monopoly, but slightly different. And tomatoes from Mars. Are you ready for that? Or we're talking about nature, community, the global family, all in this together. So that's what we're talking about tonight. And so I've got an appropriate beer, local beer made in Marble Falls, Texas, just up the road here, called Save the World. Well, saving the world has a lot to do with food, and food has a lot to do with saving the world. And we've got Deanna Zant with us as always. Hello, Deanna.
Hello. How are you, Hightower?
And what do you want to hear about tonight from our viewers and listeners and tuner-inners?
Every single thing, honestly, every single thing. No, but more specifically, I want to hear where you're watching from, what you're drinking. As usual, we love to hear when people from all over the country and sometimes all over the world, depending on your time zone, are what's happening. And also, how do you celebrate Thanksgiving? We love to see the multitude and the diverse expressions of Thanksgiving that happen that are outside of the kind of corporate whitewashed version of what Thanksgiving could be. So we want to hear from you and how you celebrate. If you have links to your favorite recipes, post them in the comments, reply to me on Twitter. I'm here and I'm going to be fielding them all night and putting stuff up on screen and all that good stuff. So
let us all connect.
That's my jam.
And we are, as Deanna indicated, all across the globe, interplanetary even, and perhaps beyond the cosmos. So, but let's start with a terrific advocate for sensible food policies over the years. Tom Philpott is food and agriculture correspondent for Mother Jones magazine. Now think about that a moment. Food and agriculture correspondent. How many publications have one of those? Not the New York Times, not the major television networks and the big internet powers, but Mother Jones does, and Mother Jones is one of those dig it out magazines that I respect so much and love associating with. And Tom has been a champion of that over the years. Tom, I think we need a Philpott in every kitchen. What do you think?
I totally agree, Hightower.
Okay. Now
And
tell
maybe
us.
a high tower as well.
Well, why not? And Tom's latest book is Perilous Bounty: The Looming Collapse of American Farming and How We Can Prevent It. Are you drinking with us tonight, Tom? You got a
I
libation?
am, in fact, having a cocktail, Jim.
Good for you. And I think you need one covering the kind of topics that you do. Uh, so let's just jump right into it. You did a piece that was rather astonishing, even to me, and I'm not easily astonished about food weirdness. It's about lab meat, about to hit your dinner plate. What is lab meat?
Well, lab meat is there are certain tech bros and tech sisters, I should also say, who think that we should stop making meat, stop raising animals for meat immediately. They think it's just all bad, and grow it in vats instead. So take a few cells from the animals, put them in vats and feed them various serum and quote unquote growth media, and generate flesh in these vats. And instead of, getting a steak from a giant factory feedlot or a small diversified livestock farm, we should get our steaks and burgers and whatnot from these operations, which will miraculously reproduce these processes that have evolved over many, many, many millions of years of sort of, creating flesh in bodies to reproduce that, in factories. And according to this theory of change, this will completely allow us to eat meat guilt-free, while eradicating all of its various environmental troubles. That's the theory.
So we're going to make meat. Is that right?
We're going to make meat. We're going to
in a factory.
We're going to engineer meat without animals. Is the basic idea.
Except,
here.
as I understand from what you wrote, that they actually have to start with meat to make meat.
They do. They need,
Curious.
first of all, to harvest some cells from living animals, and then it turns out that getting cells to replicate and reproduce and grow in a vat, it's really hard to figure out the feed. And so the solution to that so far has been to add some fetal bovine serum into that mix.
That sounds
and
good.
Miraculously, this stuff, and
Is that on your grocery shelf?
No, well, not exactly. So here's what that stuff is, and it's really disgusting. So in the process of creating, industrial dairy, so you have these giant feedlots of dairy cows that are sitting there giving up their milk to these mechanical sort of systems that harvest the milk. Eventually, these dairy cows get spent. Their miserable lives last 4 or 5 years, and they're spent. In the current system, they are now shunted into slaughterhouses, and their meat is harvested. But occasionally, some of them are pregnant with calves, and they have them inside of them. And so there's an industry that exists to extract those fetuses and harvest their blood. I know it sounds like it's, I don't know, vampiric. And
It does.
And this has like a purpose. I mean, there is like a medical industry based on generating, human body parts. Like if you need a little cartilage or something like that, there's this whole medical industry and sort of biotech medicine that has been using this stuff for years because it's an easy way to keep cells growing outside of an animal's body. But So this stuff is ruinously expensive, thousands of dollars an ounce. The biotech industry will pay it because they have the leverage to, charge really high prices for medicine. And as a result of the high price, most of the lab meat products that have existed so far are really expensive. It's just really one of the reasons why they're so expensive, but it adds to the expense. And so despite all of the sort of press release hype about, there's a press release that came out earlier this year about how in Singapore they're serving chicken, but it was raised in a lab. What they're not telling you is that that's kind of a stunt, and the stuff is still really, really expensive, like more expensive than caviar or Wagyu steak. And we're talking thousands of dollars.
Yeah, I think, as I understand it, there was a test a few years ago, or our product a few years ago, that was their demonstration product, and it was a beef patty that came out of this process of making meat in a lab that you have to feed. It's kind of hard to get the notion that, all right, you've got to feed a cow, you got to feed a pig or chicken, but even this stuff, these little particles, cells, have to be fed, and so they're fed this blood serum, bovine blood serum stuff, and that, but yet it's. Nature is a little more complex than they realized, and so this hamburger patty, which was a 5-ounce patty, as I recall, cost $313,000.
Yes, approximately $313,000, which is, as an annual salary in the United States would put you, in a pretty comfortable place. Right. Yeah. So, like a fairly rich guy could devote his entire annual salary to one burger,
and trying to make something that is that nature itself can make, but that is not to say that the only alternative is continuing the repressive, regressive, cruel system of meat production that we now have in America. Is there anything in between?
I think there might be, Jim. So we get this dichotomy of, either produce it in a lab and have, if it were to succeed, and a lot of people have their doubts that it'll ever succeed in coming up with a product that consumers would actually be able to afford or want to eat. But if that were to happen, so the alternatives are produce it in a lab or continue this, incredibly destructive feedlot system that, exists on exploitation of workers, on animals, incredible environmental destruction. I think it's a false dichotomy. I think we could actually, first of all, regulate the meat industry. And force it to actually pay for the environmental destruction that it costs, pay its workers a living wage, et cetera. And then at the same time, we could support diversified family farms, diversified farms that don't destroy the environment. And we could create slaughterhouses that pay a decent wage. We could have a $15 minimum wage and could pay even more than that in these slaughterhouses, and have meat that would be a lot more expensive than, a 99-cent burger at McDonald's. But that, if we had a just and decent society that, everyone could afford to have once in a while, or, not maybe as much as we have now, and it would be a much better and actually feasible idea than this, sort of moonshot for lab-based meat.
It's the real cost of food. I mean, we need to begin to address that. And also, you say, well, I don't want any animal producing that on my Thanksgiving table. All right. There are plenty of very innovative people who are out there right now, chefs and entrepreneurs who are developing things with beans and beets and et cetera that are meat alternatives that actually seem to work. So it seemed to work in terms of the consumer acceptance of them and affordability.
That's right. You know,
Absolutely.
Hightower, I was just thinking about in our latest issue of the Hightower Lowdown, which you can find at hightowerlowdown.org, should you
Really?
so choose. Oh, do you happen to have a copy of it that you could show our viewers?
I do. Here it is right here, the Hightower
And
Lowdown. Look at that.
There
isn't
it
there a
is.
link to it?
Beautiful
It's an online version
graphics.
too.
Yeah.
There might just be Tom. Oh, there it is.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
All right.
There it is. But one of the, well, I'll leave that up a little longer. One of the things that we talk about is exactly this. You know, here in New York City, there's a great restaurant, vegan restaurant called Dirt Candy, one of my favorite places, and I'm not even vegan. And Amanda Cohen decided, the owner decided to start actually paying for her workers doing the hard work that they're doing, but also she raised her prices, and she raised her prices 30%, and her restaurant is still at full pre-pandemic volume because people are willing to pay, who can pay, are willing to pay for good food that's sustainably produced. So yeah, I just wanted to pop in and give a shout out to the Lowdown. So join us.
Well, and to restaurants like that, and we have them here in Austin and all around the country. Restaurants that are treating workers in a fair way, advancing workers to the front, and saying this is what food actually costs. And farmers have been. I've done a lot of work with farmers over the eons here, and farmers have said that forever. Look, you know, we have a cheap food policy. We don't have a cheap farm policy. Alone. We have a cheap food policy, and the middleman is the one who's making the killing in this process. And now here they come with this notion of, well, we'll just go in the lab and make meat, and that is backed by the likes of Bill Gates, Richard Branson, the airline guy out of England, the Musk brothers, by Peter Thiel, a right-wing Trump-backing hedge fund operator, by John Mackey, head of Whole Foods, based here in Austin, Texas. It's backed by major meat corporations like Tyson and Cargill. This is not some scientific adventure we're talking about. This is something that is happening right now. They're pouring billions of dollars into this to make this happen. Nestle Corporation, the international conglomerate, food conglomerate, investing in it as well. So this is something we have to pay attention to, because we have to step up and decide, do we want food or do we want bovine growth hormone serum stuff coming into it. And so I want to bring in now a partner of Tom Philpott, who is really a terrific author, a activist, economist, sociologist, and something called an agroecologist. And he is Raj Patel, and he is a professor here at the LBJ School, Lyndon B. Johnson School of Public Affairs here at the University of Texas, and author of a terrific book, good titles too, Stuffed and Starved, and The Value of Nothing. Tell us a little bit about both of those things, Raj. We appreciate you being with us. And are you having a libation?
I am. Thank you, Hightower. I've got this. It's a bottle of gin that I picked up when I was at COP26. You can see it's mostly empty now because I spent all the time.
I would think you would, going through that.
Well, yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I've been hitting the bottle, but strictly for medicinal purposes. Right. So, Stuffed and Starved is just a tale about why it is that we live in a world now where there are 2 billion people who are food insecure and 2 billion people who are overweight, and how it is that these two things can happen side by side, not by accident, but by design. This is an actual predictable outcome of the global food system as it now stands. And The Value of Nothing, it's based on the Oscar Wilde quote. Nowadays, people know the price of everything and the value of nothing. And again, it's an inquiry into the kinds of work that you've been doing your whole life, Jim. pointing out how capitalism isn't about free markets, it's about the opposite. It's about concentration of power and about a sort of a mystification of how prices, we think prices represent true cost, but in fact they represent the opposite. So that's some work I've been doing for a little while, yes, and having to drink now just as therapy, coming back from COP. But this is the thing, isn't it? Look, we can complain about the synthetic meat being just utterly horrible. But what do y'all think about the idea that actually, isn't it better than concentrated animal feeding operations if you want a planet? How do y'all respond to that?
I mean, I think my first thing is that, like so many tech solutions, it sounds so easy when you talk about it. Like, hey, GMOs. What if we could just engineer crops to do exactly what we want? Well, I think it turns out with GMO crops that it's a lot more complicated than that. And synthetic meat, what if we could just take away the animal and the body and generate meat? Well, that turns out to be too complicated too. And I think that even if this were to be a replacement for the industrial model, then we're talking 10 or 20 or 30 years. And if you're a worker in a industrial slaughterhouse who is making $10 or $11 an hour or $12 an hour for a job that is destroying your body as a matter of course, 10 or 20 or 30 years, that's a long, bloody time. I'm using a British euphemism for what I want to say because I don't know what the swearing policy is. So let me just bracket it with saying that
we no F-bombs, but everything else is fine.
Okay.
F-bombs make the editors that do broadcast later nervous. Okay. So also my mom nervous.
Repressed, bloody in its place, noted. So yeah, that first of all. And then second of all, Raj, how are we going to replace a system that is completely concentrated, that takes wealth and off the backs of workers and concentrates it up to the top, off the backs of farmers and workers, I should say, and concentrates it to these shareholders and companies like Tyson and Smithfield? Are we going to replace a system like that is, if it succeeds, going to be very highly concentrated, that is going to, I would say almost certainly have some unintended consequences, some, hard to figure out externalities, to use, capitalist economists' preferred word. All that is, I think, going to happen. It's inevitable. And, it's just a sort of idea of an easy tech fix that I just, I don't think is feasible. What about you, Jim?
Well, look who's fixing it.
Yeah, look who's fixing it. It's the same.
These are the same bastards. This is plutocratic arrogance at work. That's the bottom line here. They don't give a damn about where the meat comes from. And in fact, one of them, made a big point about, I think it was Musk, that he was only going to, no, it wasn't Musk, it was Zuckerberg, that he was going to only eat meat that he personally killed.
Right.
And then he was caught in a supermarket buying meat. So, I mean, this is just BS. And you indicated, like GMOs and pesticides before that, these were the miracles that were going to solve agriculture. Agriculture is about dirt. Agriculture is about soil, about regeneration of our within our ecology. This is from Christopher Kimball. He's a food writer and a chef and raconteur and et cetera. And he says it straight out. I've done to me. I didn't grow up on a farm, but my family did, and my relatives, and I spent time on farms, and I know what he's talking about when he's saying farming is full of manure. mud, blood, large stubborn animals, dangerous equipment, and days when things just never go right. Nor does it offer much in the way of vacations, afternoon naps, or lantern-lit dinners. It's first and foremost about hard work and hard choices, trying to scratch a living from the soil 365 days a year. That's what real agriculture in America is. It could be made gentler. It could be made more open to women and people of color, immigrants. And in fact, much of the leading movement of new farms today is made up of women. And this is a possibility that we downscale. We don't try to say how big can we make it, but how big does it need to be to serve the community? And that community are the farmers themselves. It's the community they live in. It's the eaters. It's the animals and plants. It's the dirt. Without that dirt, we're in a heap of hurt. Yet, here we go again. I'm rip and read. This is pretty easy to do. That's not the one I'm trying to rip and read.
While you're looking for the one that you want to read from, another couple of things that have come up in the comments. First of all, we've got folks from all over. Once again, it makes
Wonderful.
me so happy.
Yes.
Southeastern Ohio, that's my origin people. We also have Western New York in the house, which is also my people. So I'm a little bit biased. I like to shout them out first, but we've also got Nebraska, we've got Wisconsin, we've got San Francisco, we've got the Lower East Side of New York City. We've got a whole bunch of places, and folks are bringing some good ideas. Folks are talking about growing their own food, and dirt is life. And hunting, we have in a lot of rural areas, we have a lot of issues with overpopulation of deer for a variety of reasons. And folks that hunt and eat their own food, that's, well done. I grew up on it too, and still like it. Cousins get me some good venison sausage every once in a while, and my heart is happy. In any case, other meat sources or other protein sources that someone wanted to know about, and we wrote about this again in the new issue of the Hightower Lowdown that I have posted in the comments.
I heard of it.
I know you act so surprised every time. I'm like, dude, it has your name on it.
Yeah.
Anyway, is insects. What about eating insects?
Insects, yes. And this is more than something small. A good part of the world, and Raj and y'all are aware of this, I know, because you do global work. A good part of the world is a little less squeamish about the proteins. And things like yellow mealworms and crickets and grasshoppers. I've had crickets and grasshoppers in Mexico, for example, and find them to be surprisingly tasty and really enticing. And that's them just straightforward, much less made into meal and various products and et cetera. And so there's a whole possibility. There are plenty of insects out there. Not that we want to kill all of them, which is the American
As we are
way.
now.
Let's go get them. Let's spray those buggers. Literally. So what about that? What about other alternatives for a possible Thanksgiving down the road?
Take it, Raj.
I'm the last person to be talking about good civilized American food, because I grew up in a convenience store surrounded by cigarettes and pornography, and it was an ideal childhood, but it wasn't the place to be offering the kind of dietary advice that involves hunting and killing things. That said, yes, there are parts of the world where insects form an important part of the protein balance. But there are large parts of the world, including ones that my ancestors hail from, where you don't eat meat very much at all. And those areas, let me just go to bat for that for a little bit, because our Thanksgiving is going to be an immigrant Thanksgiving. Around our table is going to be basically anyone who doesn't have anywhere to go. And that's the way we've sort of conducted it ever since I came to America. And it's just sort of strays and folk who want to be with other folk and don't have other folk to be with. That's our table. And in general, it's vegetarian. That someone might bring some meat, but in general, we get our protein from lentils and we get our protein from plants, and it's okay. In fact, it's more than okay. It's delicious, and y'all are very welcome.
Well, indeed.
I actually, can I jump in on that, Hightower? That reminded me. Yeah.
Good for you.
As if I'm shy. No,
yeah.
We all know this. Anyway, that reminds me, Raj, of there's a really wonderful organization called Hello Neighbor, which helps refugees resettling in the U.S. Connect with local families. And it actually started from a Thanksgiving dinner. And they started matching folks who were newly arrived in the country with local folks to get to know each other. It's grown into this huge resource and network. I encourage everybody to check it out. I think I've got a URL here. Yes,
something
I sure do.
You can
something
do
you can
the
do
next 2 weeks.
Invite refugees, especially into your homes, people who have been displaced and by the terrible costs that of war and everything else, and conflict and everything else, and climate change. You can have refugees in your home and invite them and have them bring their food with them. I mean, this is what it's all about, and exactly what Raj is saying, like Friendsgiving, Thanksgiving, family Thanksgiving, all of it is, what feeds your heart and what feeds your soul. So definitely check that out in the meantime.
Very good. Absolutely right. And there's a topic that Raj has written a lot about and thought a lot about, and that is globalization. We have a globalized food system, which is not essential. I mean, we can have a global localized food system that works. Here's an article out of the New York Times this very week talking about the supply chain problems that we're having, that ports are clogged and we don't have enough trucks and we don't have enough et cetera, et cetera. And so this article goes on saying that they're talking about the impact of this on agriculture in America, that farmers are being hard hit by this. Actually, farmers aren't being hard hit. It's the exporters that are being hard hit, and then they turn back and hit the farmer. So let's talk about who's really at work here. Anyway, they point out that agriculture accounts for about 1/10 of American goods exports. The industry depends on intricate choreography of refrigerated trucks, rail cars, cargo ships, and warehouses that move fresh groceries around the globe, often seamlessly and unnoticed. Why do we have such an intricate, complicated system when we can produce the food locally, and local farmers markets and restaurants who buy from those farmers markets, and processing facilities and food hubs that can be created around can establish an economy that is not dependent on a massive, intricate shipping network around the world. Does that make any sense, Raj?
Well, it doesn't, but I was going to ask Tom. I mean, this is such a perilous bounty that we have in the United States, and since your book is called Perilous Bounty, I mean, you looked at this. You looked at the ways that farmers are growing certain kinds of crops, and and when that land could be used actually for things that humans eat rather than get turned into ethanol. I mean, the fact that the largest use of our corn in the United States is not to eat but to set on fire is baffling. And I'm wondering, it just seemed, Tom, this one's for you, surely.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about it is, so the New York Times is sort of wringing its hands about, we're going to have all this stranded corn and soybeans and pork and almonds are going to be stranded at these ports, and it's going to create these hardships for farmers. But it's not stepping back and asking the question of who set up this system where all of this land and all these farms are dependent on sending this food internationally, to getting it out internationally. They're way overproducing compared to the United States, like compared to our consumption patterns and our needs in the United States. And the idea is that, well, okay, we are so productive in our cornfields and our pork, giant sort of pork facilities, and our massive almond groves in California's Central Valley, that we can satisfy the American market and send it out elsewhere and feed the world. That's the idea. But if you look at where this produce goes, it's not feeding anyone who is hungry and who is cut off of food markets. It's going to, very, very well off, comfortable consumers that if they can't get their, corn-fed pork chop, they'll have plenty else to eat. It's not going to feed those markets, to the extent that it's having any impact in the global South, what it's doing is putting farmers there out of business. Corn farmers in Mexico, producers who do sort of community scale livestock production in other places. It's putting them out of business. But so we've created this entire system that's based on exports, and in the process of doing it, we are, and this is what my book argues, we are completely unraveling and destroying ecosystems in two of the most important food growing regions in the world, and that's the California Central Valley and the Corn Belt of the Midwest. These are jewels of global food production. On the world, in the world context, there are some of the best places to grow food. And we could be growing food for people to eat and not putting farmers out in places like Mexico and Southeast Asia. And in fact, we could be using resources to support farmers in those areas, or at least not destroying their livelihoods. And so this entire system is based really not on the well-being of those farmers, as you were suggesting, Jim, in your question. It's based on the multinational companies that are behind these exports. And they're really the ones that are freaking out right now because their system is having some hiccups. It will trickle down and cause pain in far country in the United States. And it will also trickle down into global commodity prices that will end up hurting poor people across the globe. But these particular products, I mean, it's a whole system based on it only can survive if there's poverty. It needs poverty to survive. And of course, when it messes up and has glitches like it's having now, it exacerbates poverty. But the solution isn't to prop it back up again, which is what ends up happening. The solution is to try something different. And that's that's something that Raj has worked on quite a bit in his various different books, including Inflamed. Like his new book, Inflamed, this situation is not working out in the global South one bit.
Not just his books, but his advocacy and his work with communities around the. That's important.
Flatter away, gentlemen, please.
No, but it's really important to realize that this isn't an academic exercise for you two guys. Y'all are involved, as I am, in trying to actually make change, and you only make that at the grassroots level by talking to regular folks. And again, going back to this article in the New York Times, one thing the corporatization depends on is a media that accepts the mythology of capitalism being inevitably beneficent. This article headline again in the New York Times: "Crunch at ports spells trouble for U.S. farms." But then, in their second paragraph, it says that this dairy cooperative, California Dairies Inc., which manufactures milk powder, ships it to factories in Southeast Asia and Mexico that use it to make candy, baby formula, and other foods. Candy, baby formula, and other foods owned by U.S. multinational corporations. So we're shipping raw commodities to them, we get a cheap price, and then they sell it back to us at a high price. That's not. Donald Trump even understood that that was a raw deal. He didn't have any solution for it, but that's another story. But our the progressives have got to understand that that the so-called liberalization of the global economy is bullshit, and that we've got to get back to an economy that actually works for people, just ordinary workaday people.
And let me just interject. I mean, to go back to one of Raj's points, like Southeast Asia has existed and thrived for millennia without a dairy culture. There are plenty of other ways to get protein and whatever nutrients are in milk and dairy without cows and milk. And part of this process of overproducing for the US market and sending it overseas and quote unquote feeding the world is ginning up these markets and creating, hey, don't you want a Domino's pizza with cheese in the crust and triple cheese on top? Well, if we can get you hooked on that,
yes,
we can sell you the meat.
That's besides the point.
We will sell you the milk powder that will create that cheese for you at a very cheap price that will then sell you. And yeah, I mean, that's the whole game here is that these are unnecessary products.
And it's milk milk being sent to parts of the world that are vastly lactose intolerant. I mean, it's a magic of this kind of marketing. But here's the interesting thing. If we're thinking about solutions, you alluded to one earlier on, Jim, which I'm excited for us to dig into, which is, look, right now in America, we know who the most profitable farmer is, and it's the largest landowner of farmland is Bill Gates, and that's because farmland is an asset class, and it's great because you park your money there, and not only do you see the farmland appreciate because they're not making any more of it, but you also have the toil of the farmer on the land and the farm workers who we need to talk about also on the land, and that's a sort of revenue source. So as a former commissioner of agriculture in Texas, how do you start talking about land reform in America, which if we're going to have more people on the land doing sustainable agriculture, we need smaller farms, farms that value labor, that value farm work. And American farms are set up for vastness, particularly here in Texas, where we sit high in the saddle. How do you get that conversation about the need for smaller farms and for land reform off the ground in a state like this?
Well, you do it by talking about it, not by political mouths like me, but by getting the farmers who are doing it, and the communities who are supporting that, and the marketers who are supporting that, to step forward and demonstrate. The key to agriculture change has always been from the land-grant colleges forward in the 1850s, 1860s, has been to demonstrate. If you go to a farm right out here in Milam County or anywhere in the country, and it's making something different. We promoted organic agriculture when I was commissioner of agriculture. And people scoffed at it. I mean, you could have walked it. It's like you walked into the extension agent wearing a pink tutu or something. What the hell are you talking about?
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
We support that.
I'm wearing under here.
We are farmers.
Raj is wearing one right now.
Yes, and I want to see it.
This is getting out of hand here. Let's bring it back our focus to those farmers out there, and they would scoff because all the media, the farm media and the Farm Bureau and the whole system is built on ridiculing any kind of community agriculture like you're talking about, Raj, and so they doubt it from the start. But then if one of them tries it. And we had a guy out in Gaines County, that's way out in West Texas. This is wheat country. These are farms that are 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 acre farms. This isn't a mom and pop little operation, though it is mom and pop actually running it. And this guy, he started out, he's got a 2,000 acre wheat farm with some cattle. And he's doing okay with that, but he's not, because the wheat prices are down. He has no control over that. The cattle prices then are down. He has no control over that. He's going broke. So he started out by joining our program of farmers markets in local communities. And again, the ag establishment and the ag press said, this is silly stuff that Hightower's talking about here, farmers market. You can't make a living on farmers market. Well, it was the only cash income that he had was what he got off of that farmers market every Saturday morning. So that allowed him to survive. But then he began to look into, wait a minute, what is this? Organic agriculture. Well, it means you use less chemicals. It means you
Oh,
Oops. We lost Hightower for a second. Hopefully he'll come back. There he is.
because
There he
the
is.
prices of it. Because the prices of it are better, so your costs are down, your prices are up, and you're doing better. And because this farmer out in Seminole, Texas,
There he goes again.
yeah.
Yeah. This happened last time we started
About capitalism.
talking about corporate stuff, is that we found
Coincidence?
there was an Amazon truck that drove by and the internet went out. So
oh yeah, he was there. Yeah, right. Check the
yeah.
window.
Anyway.
Okay. Well, anyway, the point being that this farmer was able to make some income to be able to just survive through a farmer's market, and then shift into organic agriculture, which saved him money and got a better price for his commodity, and he began to do better. And then his neighbors began to come around and kind of kick the dirt on his farm and say, "So organic, huh? What is that?" And then it expands, and that's real. That's agriculture democracy at its very best, and that's why we ought to be encouraging, because the entrepreneurship, the genius, the brain power and creativity is there.
Absolutely.
Hey,
I
Hightower,
also go ahead.
I just have a quick question for Hightower, although it probably isn't going to be a quick answer. But one thing that I have been just fascinated with in recent years is the rural populism and that sort of left populism that sort of thrived in the 1980s. And there was an urban-rural aspect to it. And I think it was embodied by Jesse Jackson's campaigns in 84 and 88. And I know you're a big part of those. And I think your candidacy and your rise to ag commissioner was part of that. And I think it holds so many lessons for what we need now, this sort of multiracial populism embodied by Jesse Jackson. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that and how we could get back to that. How could we make that happen again?
By doing it, really. I mean, I call it democratic populism to counter corporate populism, which is what Trump is. Democratic populism. Investing in ordinary people at a local level, investing in their genius, and then spreading their success from place to place. That's how the original populist movement in the 1870s began and expanded. It was a genuine grassroots movement, and again, that's what farmers and most rural people. Main Street businesses in rural areas and et cetera, they understand that. I can look over here and see that it's real. It's not some academic paper or some politician talking about it. It's old Joe Bob over here and Billy Sue who are making something go, and I want to know how that works.
And I think this example is also really poignant, because one of the things that I learned growing up reading you and watching you and then getting to work with you is, for example, with Jesse Jackson, you and Bernie were the first and for a long time only white people that actually publicly supported and endorsed Jesse as a candidate, and that was pretty radical for 1984. And I think that's the intention is people of privilege have to work on these systems and have to have to use their privilege for good, right? And I could go on and on about that, but that's huge.
People who are not, ideological nutballs are lost in the ozone somewhere of politics. Will take good information and experience and put it to work, no matter who's delivering that. And that was the beauty of Jesse Jackson. When I endorsed Jesse Jackson, and it was Bernie Sanders when he was mayor of Burlington, and myself as ag commissioner here in Texas, we were the only two white officials, Democratic Party officials in the country to endorse Jesse Jackson. And I said at the time that if he's standing up for my populist principles and populist issues and populist constituencies, why am I not standing up for him? And it just made sense. Even to my old daddy, I called him the night before I made the Jackson endorsement because I didn't want him to be caught off guard in Denison, Texas. And he said, I said, well, I'm going to endorse Jesse Jackson. And he said, well, he's the only one making any sense. That's the key. Just go
and
make
sense. And he almost
sense.
won in '88. Let's not forget. He
won Michigan. He won.
He pushed Dukakis to the brink, and
the whole party. Yeah.
And then someone named Rick Perry made a nasty campaign ad about your endorsement that he used to gin up, I would say, basically right-wing populism that led to your defeat in 1990, which I think.
It was right-wing racism. It wasn't populism. It wasn't
basically racism. Yeah.
But and it wasn't Rick Perry. He didn't have the brains to do it. He's the guy who put the goober in gubernatorial. But it was Karl Rove who ran his campaign, and went out and got the money to put TV ads on, showing me with Jesse Jackson, showing a guy burning a flag, setting a flag on fire, throwing it on the ground, and out of the flames, the TV ad, out of the flames came my picture. So I was, that's what they do, and so they nipped me, but then Ralph Nader and others came to me and said, "Oh, now they've turned you loose. You can go out into the countryside and do more." So, political losses are, as I said at the time, some Texas politics sometimes is like sometimes you're a what's the bird? I'm trying to think of the bird, the pheasant bird, not the pheasant, but the sometimes.
Oh, the one that you shoot, a skeet.
No. A bird, the bird with the feathers that bloom
Peacock.
out. Peacock. So
a peacock. Okay.
One day you're a peacock.
Sounds like.
One day you're a peacock, and the next day you're a feather duster. Yeah, but it doesn't change the issues, because it didn't change what we had developed and showed that can be done, and people picked that up and went with it. There were no farmers markets when I came into office, and now there's 15 farmers markets here in Austin, and all across the state.
And that's actually something that I wanted to bring up too, as far as solutions that we were talking about, was Hightower, you created these pipelines for Black farmers and other farmers of color to get their products into local supermarkets, for example. That didn't exist. They did not have those relationships. You set an intentional path for people to be able to sell their goods to local supermarkets. Along those lines, along the farming lines, we had a question earlier about restorative agriculture. What does it mean to be restorative? What is restorative agriculture, and how can we reduce the harm that our ag system currently causes through restorative agriculture? If y'all want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, both of y'all, you've both done work in it. Raj?
Super quickly, insofar as I understand, there are so many terms around this, as agroecology and regenerative agriculture, but restorative is a very interesting term because comports with the idea of restorative justice, and I like that because it suggests that, well, it points out, first of all, that a lot of industrial agriculture is about theft. It's about stealing nutrients from the land. It's all about stealing the land itself. It's about stealing time from workers. It's about stealing lunch hours and bathroom breaks from workers all along the supply chain. And all of a sudden, you have your moderately cheap food system that you were talking about earlier on. And so to restore would be not only to bring those nutrients back into the land, and you can do some of that through through things like reforestation, through agroecology, through very creative kinds of planting of the Mesoamerican corn and beans and squash. You can fix nitrogen in the soil, but we also have problems of phosphorus and potassium that need to be sort of put back in the soil. But then on top of that is the more difficult question. And again, we're back to this, Jim, where, look, here we are in Texas, where it's hard to point out even that Texas fought for slavery twice, let alone that Texas is stolen land from everyone from the Comecrudo to the Isleta del Sur Pueblo to the Comanche Empire. I mean, there's a lot about this land that would be hard to restore. But restorative agriculture can certainly sequester carbon in the soil. It can certainly improve nutrition for communities that are able to cycle nutrients back. But what about these bigger questions that are really hard to talk about right now? I mean, in part, of course, now I get that actually we're making progress. When the Texas state legislature outlaws the teaching of that we fought for slavery twice, that's progress because change begins with denial. But when when we have so few years left to be able to sequester carbon in the soil in a way that's going to leave us with a livable planet, I worry about the length of time it's taking us to restore the land and rematriate the land to its rightful people. I'm wondering, like Tom and Jim, do we have the time? And is this bigger picture of restorative agriculture any good?
I mean, my answer to that is the question of land and the question of the stolen labor and the sort of westward expansion, the sort of colonialization of the United States of this landmass that we live on, the entire landmass, and its westward push. I think these are the biggest questions we have to answer going forward. And I think they're that sort of uber question, even hovering over climate change. And I think that the trend that you mentioned earlier, Raj, of these sort of investors and hedge funds and moguls like Bill Gates, literally grabbing land because they can afford it. I think that represents one future, and it's a future that is unfolding before us. And there's another future where we figure out that this whole way that we have distributed land in this country is a construct, that we grabbed it and we stole it and we gave it away to settlers in the 19th century. And Texas has its own singular history of American settlers showing up there and sticking it to the Spanish colonies, but it was all part of the same process. And I think answering that question is the biggest question we have going forward, is how can we address that historical wrong in a way that is just and that also puts this land to a purpose of sequestering carbon and making food production something that's possible. I think we're looking at a future where a third of the Midwest
outside of the lab,
soil, which was stolen land, is gone.
Yeah.
The Central Valley is leaving us rapidly in California. How can we restore this land in a way that produces food going forward?
Well, we're still
Take it
back
away,
then.
Deanna.
Well, we're still back to the basic point of the role of agriculture being to assert culture over industry. And agriculture, it is not an industrial product. It is a natural product with science and et cetera applied to it, mechanics and et cetera. Nothing wrong with that. But fundamentally, it is a people's product. And that's why I think restorative agriculture is a good term, because we're seeking to restore. Fundamentally, we're seeking to restore the notion that we're all in this together, and without that, we don't have anything. I mean, as a species, I mean, planet's going to survive. It's going to do fine. Maybe not so fine, but it doesn't. Planet doesn't care, that I know of, at least. And so it doesn't care whether we exist or not. We haven't existed that long. So whatever is next. But whether we, as a people, can be quasi-intelligent enough to try to come together and build something bigger than meat made in a vat. So with that, we're going to close it off, and we thank both of you, Raj Patel and Tom Philpott, the great work that y'all are doing. Again, not just as authors and scholars, but and writers, but people who are out there trying to carry this message forward and trying to build something big for America. And that's not just America, the world. We need to stop just saying America, but the world. So we've got your connectors up. Right, Deanna, for where people can find you. There it is, Tom Philpott, and rajpatel.org. There you are, net and org. Okay. We thank you.
Wait. Also, would you like to get more Hightower in your inbox?
I really
every
would.
week.
You should.
You should. And you can, for free. A weekly email that we put out where you can stay up to date with everything that's happening in Hightower's world, hightowerlowdown.org/email. And we look forward to seeing you on our next Chat and Chew. And Hightower, you want to take us out?
Goodbye. Thank you very much, all of you, for tuning in, and you two guys for what you're doing. Take care.
Cheers,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
See you at the next Chat and Chew.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Deanna.